Gentlemen, furries, everywhere, welcome to the wonderful little panel that I put together for you. My name is Panzer the Dragon. I love seeing all these people in the audience here. I can see some fantastic architecture, some great models everywhere around me here. This is exactly the kind of people that I want to see in this audience here this evening, because I'm going to teach you a little bit more about what you can do to turn all your models into special little dudes and dudettes and etc. So this is digital tailoring for 3D models. Essentially, taking your 3D model and turning it into something a little bit different. This isn't a major overhaul. This isn't a crazy redo of everything you've got. This is, I like what this is, but I want to give it a wristwatch. I want to give it a new shirt. I want to give it like some socks or something. This is taking something that you like, that everyone else likes, something that's you might find awesome, but maybe a little overdone, and giving it just enough of a tweak where it can be just a bit different, something that's more you, more unique, more interesting to you. Retexturing can do a very similar thing, but in this instance, we're going to be playing around with Blender. Blender is what we're going to be using here. So, first though, let's introduce myself. Sometimes I'm Ramble the Wolf, sometimes I'm Panzer the Dragon. Either way, I will be your host this evening. I am a hobby game developer. I am staff on Furry Weekend Atlanta, and I am an IT professional in the real world. I want to use code to make art even better. I love the idea of taking things that friends of mine and people that I've commissioned are making and make them even better in any little way that I can. One of the great ways is by commissioning a 3D model, naturally, for VR chat and such, and I was very lucky enough to get to do so from the wonderful, amazing Toastador, who also has a bunch of fantastic models, one of which is on sale right now. So be sure to check out Toastador if you want to get a cool shark avatar for yourself, and then maybe use a little bit of what you learned today to give them a little something extra. So, like I mentioned before, you're going to need Blender for this. This is specifically a panel about using a 3D modeling software in order to take the 3D model you already have, not mess with it too much, just give it a little something extra. We're going to be using Blender to do this. You're going to need your model, of course, that you downloaded from the interwebs. There are many potential ways you could have downloaded this file. It depends on how the person's made the model. What we are specifically going to be talking about today is taking a .fbx or a .blend file, taking one of those file types and altering it just a little bit. Again, this is very simple, very beginner friendly, just a little bit of altering to make it a little more special, a little more unique to you. So, if you are, however, interested in learning more about the process of creating and editing 3D models that goes beyond just this starter's guide for you, not only is Blender a free program that you can play around with for as long as you want with no worries about trials or anything like that, you can also find fantastic resources that get everyone started. It's a bit of a meme, I know, but the Blender Guru has a beginner donut tutorial. This tutorial will walk you through every basic process you can think of for making a Blender render, making Blender models, altering those Blender models, turning literally just a mathematical donut into an actual real life thing that you really want to eat because it looks good and you made it all yourself. I made one for me. I did it. I liked how it is, and I took what I learned there and I applied it to a little bit of the 3D models that you see in front of you now. So there are clothes and things that I've made for my character that will be shown throughout the presentation. I made them. It's very easy. If I can do it, you can do it too, and I'll show you how. So to get started here, we are going to be learning the first step. This is the secret ingredient. This is the thing that they don't tell you about, all right? This is copying the topography. The mesh is already there. We just have to make a copy of it, and then we'll get to the fun part of making it look special and unique. So this is a bit of a simple first step, but it involves some prep, which is why it's important. The first thing you'll need to do is open your file. I know that's really easy if you already have a blend file. In fact, Little Drawn Panzer there is really excited about it. But if you have an FBX file, it's a little bit more difficult. Not impossible, just a little bit more difficult. You'll need to create a blank Blender project. This is really easy. You just open the Blender program and create new is one of the objects right there. Once you have your cube on your screen, you can delete it. We don't need it. And then you're going to go to File in the top left, Import, and then specifically the FBX FBX option. The FBX option is going to allow us to import your FBX file that you have prepared. So again, if you have a Blender file, just open it, no big deal. But if you have an FBX file, import it now. Now, every FBX file is a little bit different. You might have to change a few of the import settings depending on how it's been set up. These are definitely expected and normal. Just ensure that you're doing everything that you can and import it into your Blender program. Once you have it in front of you, then we can proceed. So if you don't have a Blender or FBX file, totally fine. All right. Some of your files may come in different sorts of packages. A lot of people will give you a Unity package specifically with your character already ready to go. It just looks perfect. All you have to do is mess around with a few Unity settings to give it a different color or some such. Some people will straight up give you a Unity project file. Again, same sort of idea. There are different types of 3D model programs. For instance, the DAE file format. This is another 3D model format that you can import into Blender. We won't get into it for the sake of time and specification, but specifically speaking, these files can also be imported into Blender. We're just going to be focusing here on FBX and on blend file, which we've already got open in your Blender program. So with these files open, we have to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get onto the fun part. First is that there are tabs along the top of your Blender program. They are just little tabs, little notches. There's a few of them. Don't get overwhelmed. It's all right. You're specifically looking for the modeling tab. That's what's going to let us do our special model editing and duplicating and topography copying that we're going to get to in just a moment. You have to do this in the modeling tab, though. Then, once you're in the modeling tab, you're going to see your character in front of you doing one of the things, just standing there, having a good time. And they're going to be waiting for you to edit, which is great. That's where we want them. Then you need to make sure you have the right model selected. Sometimes models will come with multiple models packed into one. Sometimes these are like sometimes you have a shirt already part of the character or glasses or other accessories that just come with the character as they are. This happens. It's fine. Make sure that you're selecting the correct model. So for instance, if you want to give your character a watch, which is the specific example we're going to be using in this demonstration, then you're going to want to make sure you have the body selected, or at the very least, whatever the wrist is. That way we'll be able to copy the topography and get it all working. So with the body selected, or with whatever you need selected, then the main steps. We've got all of our setup out of the way. What are we actually doing? The first thing you need to do is with the body up and running, you're going to see all the vertices, all the dots, all the math ready and available for you. You're going to select what you want to copy. All right. Blender has a select tool. You can either use the drag and drop. You can create a lasso. You can use the X-ray tool to make sure you have the entire section that you want. Otherwise, you're just selecting the one side. So make sure that you have all the sides selected. Make sure that you have everything in a three-dimensional space. You're working with a 3D model here, selected in its entirety. Then you follow these next steps exactly. This is the secret sauce, people. This is the important bit. Next steps. Shift, letter D. Then you right-click. Then you press the P button. And then you click Selection. That's it. That's the secret sauce. You have copied topography. But what did you just do? Let's break it down here. All right. Shift D, the first thing you did, this duplicates what you have selected. So for instance, in the example of a watch, which you can see on the right there, we have it selected and then we duplicate it. So there is now an existing topography that's been copied into a new one that's sitting there. If you move your mouse at this point, you will actually see your copied topography moving around. Now, you don't want it to move around. So we right-click. This resets the position of the new mesh. It doesn't delete it, it resets it. So now there's a new mesh sitting mathematically perfectly across the old mesh. But it is still there. It's different and it is there. It will overlap it perfectly. Don't left-click at this point. You specifically want to right-click. This resets it to where it is. Then you click the P key. For whatever reason, this is the split menu. Inside of the split menu, this is where we're going to select how we split the model into a new model. Remember earlier when I said the glasses could be a separate model inside the outliner, which is on the right? You are specifically looking to do just that. You're going to take your selection, turn it into a new thing. This is importantly entirety. When you need to turn it off and on, if you ever need to, for instance, not be wearing the thing that you're making and then be wearing it later, it's important for that. If you just needed to be sitting there, it's still also probably a good idea for organizational purposes to split it so that you don't accidentally mess with the original body. You're just making a new one. So that splits it, and it gives it a new name too. It'll still be called whatever the base layer is. It'll just then be called that .001. That way you can tell it apart from the original thing. So again, you have duplicated it, reset its position, split it into a new object. This allows you to take the mesh that you have and copy it into a brand new thing. There you go. Your first step is done. Now we're going to edit the new object. You're going to take the new thing that you have, and now we're going to turn it into its final form. So the main steps here are simple. You have the new item. Go in on the outliner, and let's edit that new item, not the body any longer. We're done with that. Now we specifically need to move in to edit the new item. You can do that by clicking what is this dot on the left. It'll turn into 4 dots, one of which is colored in. This means that you're now editing this object. You will also see the dots of the body inside of Blender disappear, and you'll see the dots, the vertices of the new object appear instead. That way you know you're selecting the right thing. Now comes the fun and artsy part. You can edit this thing however you want. There's a million different modeling tutorials about exactly what you can do here, but in practice, you essentially just edit it. You can sculpt it, you can just move the vertices around if you'd like, you can add detail, remove detail, make it look like this, that, or the other. It's really up to you. It's entirely up to you. I'm not going to get into it too much because every single project will be just a little bit different, and I'll be happy to answer your individual questions about what particular ideas you might have at the end of the panel. We're going to get to it. But a few tips and tricks that I can give you in my experience. The G key is your friend. With a vertice, with a edge, with a plane selected, you can use the G key to move your selection in 3D space. If you just select the G key, then Blender does a pretty good job of moving it where you want it to be. But if you specifically want to specify a direction that you would like for this to move in, then you can do so by using the X, Y, and Z keys, or Z if you're fancy. You can use these keys to distinctly tell which direction you would like Blender for move your selection in. That way you can decide if you're going in and out, up or down, left or right, specifically. This is very helpful for a variety of reasons. E will allow you to add a new selection attached to your current selection. This is called extruding, also very useful. If you don't have enough topography in an area to add the detail that you want, you can extrude in that area to give it some volume, give it some 3D space. This will allow you to, for instance, make an object a little bit wider, make it a little bit more physically, 3D as opposed to just looking like a 2D set of textures. You can turn a face into a cube or a sphere, even if you're a little fancy. This is the key that allows you to make an object feel like it has depth, presence. So definitely keep that in mind. Again, this is your E key. And then there's a very, very simple tool that I found, especially when you've selected a round piece of mesh that goes all the way around. If you use the Alt-S key combination, Alt-S, this will allow you to change the radius of your selection. So if your selection is circular, this will change the radius of it. This is great, especially in our wristwatch example. This allows you to take an object that is very, very, very flat to your wrist and give it a little bit more width. That way it pops a little more. You can tell. It doesn't get mixed in with the existing mesh. It's now its own thing sitting on top of your wrist. And to add to it, you can use the E key to extrude some geometry and make it look less flat. So now it's not just a texture sitting on top of your textures. It's actually an object that has a little bit of a side to it. You can use this object to give it more of the illusion of actually being there on your wrist or wherever. Those are a few tips and tricks that I hope you find useful. I actually have a few more for you. Blender has a built-in texturing tool. This is covered in the Blender Guru donut tutorial, how to use it properly. You can use this to give your object simple textures. You can always replace it later, totally up to you. Unity has their own texture thing that you can mess with. If you want to learn more about Unity updating, Gilboy tomorrow is doing a fantastic looking panel. I'm going to try to be there if I can, on actually getting your content into VR chat. And in that, he's going to talk more about Unity and how it works. I highly recommend looking at that panel if you want to learn more about the Unity side of things. Again, this is just for Blender. But Blender does have a built-in texturing tool. It's not quite your... what's the word? The pro painter. There are other programs that do a quote unquote better job. They give you more tools to use. You can make your textures more realistic or use pre-built sort of things that they have in those programs to do what you need to do. Those are great. They're fantastic. But Blender also has one. It's built in, and you can use it to play around with the idea of your texture, give it a little bit more life. Try to find out exactly what it is you need to make. If you need to give it more detail, there are programs for that. But as a starter, this is perfect because it's free and included. You can use this texturing tool and the different ways that it works in order to give your new addition to your model the beginning of its appearance and what it needs to do. This will allow you to kind of finalize how it looks and make it look a little bit different than your original model, make it stand out a little bit more. Again, make you look just a touch different. And then I actually got ahead of myself. If you want to give an object depth, you can do the extruding trick that I had. So you have the flat object, you can actually give it some depth by giving it some more polygons, by giving it some more depth and just presence, so it doesn't look just like a flat 2D texture. Now, I would like to let you know that obviously there is a reason to not add too many polygons. That is not great. If you have too many polygons, it will affect your performance. Always keep that in mind. If you add fancy things like dynamic bones and things, that's going to make your model larger in size and perform less optimized. Optimize is good, so definitely keep that in mind. You don't want to create like the Among Us shoes on your model, because then no one's going to want to load you in and no one's going to see your cool shoes, right? If you're going to make some shoes for your character, do it in a way that adds to it without distracting it with complexity. Don't make your file size 1,000,000 gigabytes. Just keep it simple, keep it good, and then if you need to add some detail, there are some other ways to do so. For instance, oh, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. Okay, we're going to get to that in a moment. Actually, what we need to cover first is ensuring that your new object can move correctly. A really difficult part of the modeling process, especially when it comes to moving models like all of us, is the weight painting. I'm sure that all of you can point to something in your model that moves in a weird way and you're not quite sure why. This is probably due to weight painting, and it just needs a little bit of love. This is absolutely something that can be done. In this particular instance, we need to take a look specifically at what we can do with your newly created model to make sure that it's weight painted correctly, that when you move your arm, your new thing will also follow. In most situations, it already will. However, if you want to make absolutely 100% sure that it's going to be doing what it needs to do, follow these steps. It's a little complicated. I'm going to try to kind of write it out as quick as I can here. In the properties window, which is on the right at the bottom in the default Blender layout, on the left of this properties window, there's a few different tabs. You're specifically looking for the tab with the wrench icon. This is your modifier properties tab. A modifier will allow us to do what we need to do here. We're specifically looking for the modifier called data transfer. There's an add button at the top. Click that. Look for the data transfer option. This will allow us to transfer data, specifically weight painting data, from the base model to your new object. This ensures that it's in sync. So mark the source, which is one of the options inside of the new modifier that you've added, as the original object, your body, your leg, your arm, whatever it might be. Mark that object as the source. That's where it's pulling the information from. Then check the box at the bottom next to vertex data. That includes your weight painting. So you are taking the weight painting from the source object and applying it automatically to your new object. So whatever your new object is closest to, it's going to automatically inherit that weight painting from. No matter what you do with it, it should be pretty close in getting everything moving how it ought to. That way, when you move your arm, your wristwatch isn't in Timbuktu somewhere. This keeps it pretty simple. Again, with all of these things, there is more complexity. There is more intrigue. You can make it do a lot of crazy cool things. This is just to get you started. And I highly recommend, if you like it, to check out more tutorials, ask some questions here in just a moment. Again, just to get you started. So now we're going to finalize the object. This is taking what we've done, our modeling, our texturing, whatever thing that you needed to do. This is taking it and putting it into a format that we can use in Unity to finish the project. But we're not going to be talking about Unity. Just want to let you know, again, Guildboy is doing something tomorrow that I'm highly looking forward to. However, if your model was already ready to go, if it was an FBX file or a Blender file and it's already set, if it was already prepared for VR chat, then all you need to do is add your geometry, add your new thing, and then export it back into the file format it was in before. This should allow you to replace it inside of Unity and just pick up where you left off there. Oh, also, important point, you have to be at least a new user. Very important. You can't upload any content until you're a new user. This includes worlds, includes a lot of different things. So be sure that you're a new user. Spend time in VR chat. Have fun. Make some friends. Go to cool conventions. And just kind of learn what you got going on. Learn more about what makes VR chat so special and awesome. Then, once you get that special notification, I remember mine, you will be able to start uploading your content. Once you do have that ability, then we'll be able to use Unity to upload everything. There are tutorials on how to do this. Don't worry. Again, we're not going to be talking about it, but you will be able to. With your newly altered model, let's go ahead and get that ready. The main steps here are as follows. Once your model is ready, we're going to be following these steps here. File, export, FBX. Again, file is in the top left. File, export, FBX. You want to choose the FBX model specifically because Unity likes those best. You're going to find a folder you'd like to save your model to. This can be different from the folder that your file was originally in. This can be a completely new folder. It can be the same folder. If it is the same folder, or even if it's really a different folder, honestly, rename it. Give it a new name. Say with watch at the end of it, or with X, with Y. Do one of those. This will allow you to specifically designate, okay, this was the file without the watch. That was the one that I just bought. Then I added the watch, and we're good to go with this file particularly. You don't know how many times I've lost an FBX file because I'm like, what? Where did it go? I don't know. Because there's so many files that are all named Panzer the Dragon. It gets lost. So piece of advice, give it a name. Then you want to specifically check under the armature option, because there's a button there that Blender likes to press that you don't want it to press. And that button is the Add Leaf Bones option. Uncheck it. You don't want it. We don't want leaf bones, okay? We got enough leaves. We don't need leaf bones. Remove it. You don't need it. VR chat gets confused when you have leaf bones on models. It thinks that you have like extra fingers. It's weird. Don't mess with it. Uncheck Add Leaf Bones. You don't need it. The bones are already perfect as they are. You don't need any extra. Then you're going to export your files in FBX. Done. You've done it. Blender will take care of it for you. It'll take your model information, turn it into an FBX file, and that should be ready to go. It's also not a horrible idea if you didn't already have the blend file to save it as a blend file. Blend files are really easy to open in Blender. You just open them. They're ready. They're prepared. They're good to go. So now's a really good time to check on that and make sure that you are saving as a blend file for future editing. There are many ways to customize a model. This is what I was mentioning earlier. You can go crazy with shaders in Unity. You can retexture things with more advanced tools that let you do patterning and normal maps and crazy stuff like that gives your character depth that doesn't even really exist. It just looks like it does. It's awesome. It's great for optimization too. There are animations that you can add inside Blender. I think that's so cool that you can take those animations and then replace them with animations that VR chat will give you automatically. Who has the meditating AFK animation, just the default one? Whenever you go AFK, you just start meditating and you hover in place, right? You can replace that. You can give yourself a new one and you could replace that. It's so cool. You can make that for you. You can do things to your characters. You can make them whatever you want. This is just the beginning right here. Yes, exactly. Look, you could replace the animations. That's awesome. I love that. Oh man, I added one too. It's I just kind of go into a think mode. I'm just doing a big think, hovering in place. You can replace these things. Ah man, you can like add emotions. Everyone's got the menu where you can just go crazy. You can add emotions. Like, look at me, I'm smiling. Toast is amazing. I'll praise toast every day, but just you can do crazy stuff like this. There is no ceiling here. Well, I mean, you can't have too many polygons, but the actual information within those polygons, the animations, the textures, all of that stuff, totally up to you. All of these cool other tools are also available for you. This is just the first step. There are so many other second steps that you can take, and I highly encourage you to do so. That's the presentation. There we go. With these instructions, with these special sauces, with these little first steps, you'll be able to take what you get at a store or wherever you get it and turn it into something a little more you. You'll be able to take something that was even made specifically for you and give it new ideas, new things, new concepts that you can just think of, and you could just add them on there. Easy peasy. And from there, you can edit them, change them, make them a little bit better. If you don't like the way that your character looks, this is kind of the first step in changing that if you trust yourself enough. This is where we start. And because all of these projects are individually yours, I'm sure that some of you probably have some questions about Blender or exactly what you need to do to get going. This is the point to ask them. I will give you my absolute best answers if I can. There is a dog symbol in front of the stage there. If anyone has any questions, the dog symbol is where you want to step so that we can see and specifically hear you. I cannot hear you until you stand on the dog symbol. So if there's any questions about modeling, about specifically how this sort of stuff works with VR chat, if there's any sort of misunderstanding about what buttons to press, for instance, or any sort of questions about what resources you can take to reach out and learn more about the different things that these tools can do, by all means, I'm more than happy to share what I know. I guess that means my presentation was pretty thorough. All right, in that case, I could talk about a cool project of mine. I'm currently in the process of taking just about everything on the top half of this dragon model, and you can actually see it in the very first very first slide of the presentation that there was a jacket. So I'm going through the process of creating an entirely new article of clothing from essentially the beginning. Oh, Red Speeds.
Yeah, no, from Twitch. Why Blender versus Maya or other modeling software?
Absolutely.
From
So the reason why Blender...
Star.
Dragonstar. Thank you very much for your question. Blender specifically, because Blender has a better relationship with FBX files. FBX files are the main file type that Unity uses, and by extension, VRChat, since VRChat is made in Unity and uses Unity to upload your information into its server so that you can become your crazy cool avatar. Blender has a better relationship with these FBX files. The Maya tools are there. You can use them, but generally speaking, Blender is both more approachable and works better with FBX files. So you'll actually get the opportunity to more easily export and import, change things that reflect within the actual environment of Unity better. It's a good place to start. It's just kind of your building block, your first step. If you like Maya, totally get you. I think Disney animates all of their 3D stuff in Maya, in an altered version of Maya. It's totally good. It's totally 100% on board. It's just that Blender is specifically better suited to messing with FBX files, which is what VR Chat likes.
Twitch chat has another one from Fun with Brian. Do you have any courses we can get? If yes, where can we find them?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is, of course, the world famous Blender Donut tutorial. This is done by Blender Guru, who is a fantastic creator of Blender related content and just general 3D modeling best practices and information. Highly recommended. Dude's kind of British. It's awesome. So, if you want a good first place to start, definitely looking up the Blender Guru for modeling tips and tricks, as well as tutorials, is a very good place to start. There are specifically some VR chat and VR avatar related content from a personal favorite YouTuber of mine by the name of Fia, who does the virtual reality show, or at least I believe did. PHIA, Fia. This YouTuber has tutorials on how to upload content to VR chat, how to make models in a very, very simple, beginner friendly kind of way, some of which doesn't even need Blender to be involved at all. I think there are genuinely some Unity plugins that will make a model for you from scratch, which is a very simple way to become an anime. So that there's a good place to start there. Again, we're going to be having the other panel tomorrow with the Gilboy, who will be talking about uploading content to VR chat. I'm very excited to see that panel myself. So if you're looking for more of the Unity side of things, I would highly recommend taking a look at that content tomorrow. Yeah, those are some good first steps that I would recommend. There really aren't any bad first steps as far as I know. There are some that are lackluster, perhaps, but anything that you learn about this program and how it works is definitely going to benefit you. Even if it's the wrong lesson, it's still a lesson and it'll tell you what not to do. So highly recommend getting out there, trying, in the words of Miss Frizzle, get messy, make mistakes, right? The best part about this is if you mess up, you don't have to publish it. You could just learn from what you did. Yes.
You able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So how would I go about making something like a clothes, like pants or a t-shirt, using the avatar's mesh?
Absolutely. So you would follow the exact same steps. You would just be more careful about exactly which vertices, edges, and planes that you're selecting. So for instance, with a watch, it's really easy because most of the time the mesh is fairly simple and straightforward around a small part of the body. For a larger part of the body, you're going to want to be more specific, more on purpose. So you're going to want to think about how pants look, how they feel, what they do around the body, and try to emulate that with the mesh. First of all, you select the parts of the body that the pants cover. You then follow our steps with the duplicating, resetting the position, and then saving them as their own object. And then from there, you can make them just a little bit bigger with the radius trick that I mentioned. That's a great place to start. This gets you a mesh that is just a little bit bigger than the body you already have. And from there, you can start texturing, messing with the vertices, giving it more depth, giving it more polygons if you want it to be a little bit more intricate. The idea is that you kind of just pop it off a little bit extra, a little bit more mesh, and then you can start giving it volume, dents, and waves like clothing has. Or you could just texture it, make it look a little bit more different, and keep it fairly close, but at the same time also give it the waves and things via textures if that's more your speed. I personally find the idea of adding detail to specific joints of the body, for instance, the knees and the arms, giving more textures to these particular areas, allow it to bend a little bit better, and also prevent clipping. A big thing with close to the model geometry like this is that a lot of times if you bend in a weird way, something will pop out from behind it and kind of poke through. If you make your object a little bit bigger, a little bit more detailed, this becomes less likely because the mesh itself actually knows what to do in stranger situations. It can bend a little more fluidly. Highly recommended to do that, especially around joint areas when there's mesh underneath your mesh. There are also some cool things you can do with blend shapes where you have a blend shape on the original body that shrinks the thing that's under the thing you just made. So whenever you put on the object in Unity, you would shrink the arm that's under it or the leg, and then there would be a far less chance of something poking through, of clipping. So all of these things together allow you to make more in-depth models of larger parts of the body, for instance, pants, shirts, things like that. Thank you for your question. Hello.
Hey, so for optimization purposes, obviously, it's recommended to, like, if you have clothes, to delete the parts of the mesh underneath it. How would that affect, like you're saying, the modifier properties, the physical movements and stuff?
Absolutely. So I believe in your situation, what you're specifically talking about is the idea that you're taking the model, popping it off, and then for the purposes of getting it really optimized, removing the polygons underneath. In a lot of situations, people will take off and put on clothes, and this will allow you to have both options where you can have a buck naked avatar if you want, but then also have pants if you'd like to put them on. That is one option, but you're specifically talking about if you want an avatar and you want to replace the base avatar with one with clothes. In that situation, you would be removing the modeling underneath and adding in the modeling on top. That is a little bit more advanced. In a situation like that, you would be removing geometry, and that would also be removing weight painting information. In that particular situation, a data transfer modifier would not be the most appropriate. A more specific touch would be better. That way you would not lose any information or try to pull information that doesn't exist and get strange results. I would highly recommend in an instance like that, when you do want to be optimized, which is totally great, to learn more about how weight painting works and what you can do to specifically ensure that your model is behaving properly in that situation. Again, when you create a duplicate of geometry, it copies over the weight painting as best it can. So in those situations, you already have a starting point. It's just a matter of making sure that your starting point continues to do what you need it to do. I'd recommend testing your model by assigning it animations to ensure that it's moving in the proper ways and altering any weight painting issues that you find as you find them with any sort of weight painting kind of tutorials and things that you can use to learn as your guide.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again for your question. Hello.
Hi. So I remembered when I was looking in Blender, there was something called baking, I believe, baking an avatar. What exactly is that?
Absolutely. So baking is the process of taking information that requires pre-processing. Most usually this is lighting. And taking that information and condensing it. So for instance, if you were to take a wonderful, awesome world like this, and it's wonderful and it performs kind of poorly, what do? You take the light sources that you have, and obviously you have the dynamic lights. You have the idea that it glows on your avatar. So if I step further away, you'll notice I get darker or bluer, and then if I move closer, I'm yellow, I'm more bright. This is called dynamic lighting. This lets you do things with a scene that change, make it more realistic and immersive. This is great. This is very good. It can, however, be a bit processor intensive. So for things like models like ours, you really can't help it. It has to be dynamic or it doesn't work. But this rock right here, this is always going to be there. This isn't going to move. So you could do a light bake where you take the source of light, you simulate it shining on the rock, and then you add that simulation to the texture. So you will, as you can see, not get any shadows from my legs because the light on the rock is not dynamic. The light on my body is, so if I move around, you can see the light on my body change. But the actual rock itself will not cast my shadow because this is baked light. This information was already here and it always will be. I'm not adding any information to it by being who I am, where I am right now. So you can bake information about how lights bounce, what sort of clothing the texture should look like. You can take this information and you can apply it to your model ahead of time. This gives it more detail without it costing more resources. It's, again, a little bit more of an advanced technique, but it's absolutely something you can do. And it's really, really good if you want to create photos in Blender. This allows you to take the processing time to create lighting environments and situations where you can get the best looking thing by having it baked first. So taking it and putting the information where it needs to be beforehand to save you some time later. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Oh, is that with stream? It was stream. That guy makes cool stuff, I gotta say. All right, are there any other questions about beginner modeling, blendering, textures, things that you can start doing right now if you weren't at a cool convention where everyone's being awesome together? Yes, we
I
have
got
a
a
very
question.
small fox. Yes.
I'll pull myself up a little bit, see me. So there we go. I don't use Blender. I use Maya instead. So I want to ask, because I play with other people's models, is sometimes I get FBX files for Unity, and sometimes I get blend files in for Unity. Is there like an advantage to having a blend file instead of an FBX file?
A blend file is specifically formatted to work with Blender. It is the proprietary. Well, I hesitate to say proprietary because it's open source, but it's essentially the Blender specific file that Blender projects will use. So in that case, you're going to want to open it in Blender and then export it as a different file type. Otherwise, you will not get what you need in a Maya project. Again, you could do all these things in Maya. There are probably slightly different steps on getting those done in a different program. And it's cool that you use Maya. Totally down with that. It's just kind of the Maya process of using FBX files is a bit different. Please keep that in mind as you proceed. It might affect how things are going for you.
Oh, I'm not talking about Blender the Maya. I'm talking about in Unity. Like you can use Blender files directly in Unity. Like, is there advantage doing that?
As I understand it, I don't know enough about how Unity handles blend files. In my experience, I've always used FBX. It seems to be kind of the baseline. As I think, if I understand it correctly, Blender files are a bit larger in size, and that can affect performance. I believe Blender files also contain things like shader data, texture data that you can get from other sources in more efficient ways in Unity. It'll work. It'll absolutely work. But I think for the purposes of optimization, especially when you're already adding polygons to a model that already exists, trying to figure out how to use it with an FBX, if at all possible, is a good way to start.
All right, thank you. That answers my question.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. Hello.
So I heard A while ago when I was looking into Blender previously, something about normal maps, and I was wondering if there'd be any practical application for, say, normal maps or any of the other kind of maps for VR chat.
Yes.
No, not at all. Okay.
No. Actually, lots. Like so many. Normal maps have been around for decades. They're great. In the early to mid 2000s is when they really caught on because they allowed you to add detail that looked 3D without it actually being 3D. Because when it's actually 3D, it's hard. It's a computer has to think about 3D space and how it affects it. When you just have a normal map, you get the impression of 3D without actually having to drawing 3D, actually having to think about things in 3D. It's a 2D model that's or a 3D model with a 2D texture. The 2D texture is telling you information about how to render it without actually giving you model data, which is really, really good, especially for optimization. If you can play around with normal maps, you can get some fantastic results. This scales on my chest, little bumps. These are not modeled. This chest is, statistically speaking, from just plain geometry, flat. It is a flat thing. There are no ridges along the horizontal here. This is all normal maps because Toast is amazing. I'll say this so much. Toast is amazing. You can see details like in, I believe, the eyes, a little bit around the hair too. There's like some streaks that go through it. These are all normal maps. None of that is modeled. None of that is details in the geometry. It's all specifically things that are drawn on to give it the rendering impression of more depth than is actually there. It's a great tool. It's, again, advanced. I'm sorry. It's just a little bit more of something that you can absolutely look into. But it is specifically texturing, and it is specifically something to give a model more bumpiness, more 3D. There are a bunch of other different kinds of maps that do different things based on render settings. There's shininess maps, which determine if your scales are shiny or a little bit dull. I have a few of those on this model as well. There are maps for bumpiness, which I think determines how light interacts with your model, if it's just kind of this matte color, or if it actually gives it more of a shine. Goodness, there's maps for a bunch of different things depending on your render, depending on how it works. And you can use these different aspects a lot of the times in VR chat too. So if you apply normal maps and things to your texture, you'll actually get these cool effects that are very, very easy for processors and GPUs to handle, which keep your file optimized while adding detail. It's very, very good. Highly recommend looking into them if you're interested in texturing, as it gives your texture an extra level.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to answer one more question here. If anyone has one at all, I do appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I love seeing names in the audience that I know. That's so cool. Yes.
Where's the damn thing? Last one from Pistetzen, again by Drakenstark. When importing a model into Unity, there's frequently a notice regarding mipmap. Any advice regarding what and how mipmaps are relevant?
Mipmaps. Oh boy. I am going to leave that question for a more Unity specific sort of panel. It is not something I've ever personally run into. I wouldn't really be able to give good advice on mipmaps. Definitely recommend reaching out specifically to Unity avenues in that regard, and perhaps going to the Gilboys panel tomorrow. But thank you again for your question. I'm sorry I wasn't the one to answer it. All right, with that sorted, though, I do appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Thank you so much. It means the world to me that you're here to watch me talk way too much about cool 3D model things. I highly recommend that you try it out on something that you already have. Add something, even if it's bad, you tried, and that's a first step, and that's beautiful and wonderful. This kind of stuff is awesome, and I hope that I get to share it with you just by being here, answering your questions, and having a good time. Thank you again for coming.